the Sectional Properties Act, where now, unlike before, where I think people used to call apartments air, when you're buying, you would actually hear people curse and say, I would never buy an apartment. I'm actually buying air, when it's said in some languages, it even sounds more, in French it even sounds more. So the Sectional Properties Act now cures the issue of owning units that are within vertical spaces. Question would arise: is hacking the systems, or is hacking systems of a sovereign nation? Does that warrant to be an act of war? So those are now public international law issues. So I think over time the things will evolve in ways that, because I could foresee a case where two countries are presenting themselves before the international court, just to litigate on whether hacking into the other country. The benefit, for example, of having more than one partner is that you're able to leverage on the set of skills that each partner brings to the table.
Hi, Oscar.
Hello, Daniel.
Thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you.
And also for the sake of our audience, maybe introduce Oscar Kariuki as a person and as a profession.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me here. My name is, as you said, Oscar Kariuki. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I have now practiced for 6 years. I was admitted to the bar in 2018. And I am a partner at the law firm of Kitty, Kariuki and Gogi Law LLP, we have our offices here in Upper Hill, Nairobi.
Maybe just to unpack that a little bit, you've mentioned that you're a lawyer by profession, and that brings you joy. Maybe just going back in time, what was your journey to get to where you are? Is it something that growing up you knew you'd always wanted to do? Or how do you find your purpose and meaning and your space in God's green earth?
Well, I think maybe I may not. Maybe when I was in my preteen years, it may not have been very clear that to me that I wished to pursue a career in law. But I think as I got into my teens, maybe around 14 thereabouts, going as I progressed from the age of 14 upwards, then it began to be it began to be clear to me that it's a career path I wished to pursue. I have always been quite strong on subjects as they are called in primary and secondary school. I have always been strong in subjects in languages, in history. I think then it was in primary, it was called GHC. Now it's called social studies. I don't know if it's still called social studies with the new curriculum. There has been quite an evolution of our curricula. So then I have always not struggled with those specific subjects, and the reason that I was more oriented to them was just because I had more interest in, say, understanding the history and the economic, political dynamics of the world as it was when I was growing up. Interactions between people, what guided what rules, what frameworks guided how people interacted with each other, and so forth. So that sort of, triggered that interest, and then I started working towards getting ready now to become a lawyer, and the rest, as they say, is history.
What you've mentioned is quite interesting, that even the little things growing up sort of acts as connecting dots to what would be your meaning or purpose in life. You've mentioned the subjects, and I noted when you are preparing for this, you mentioned that you're quite passionate about languages, and you're able to take up languages pretty quickly. And I know the legal profession is quite wordy.
Wordy, I think you've had, I think when we have election petitions, there's a little more than normal publication of the legal space. You've had words like amicus curiae, because it's a borrowing from Latin. So the language plays a key role, and words and language and diction and all those phraseology, and a lot of that plays a crucial role, I think, in law, whether it's whether it's before court or when it's being practiced in commercial engagements. There's always they always question about what a specific word means. I remember when you had the election petition in 2013, there was a very long exposition by senior counsel Fred Ngati about what the word shall as used in the relevant constitutional provision at the time meant. So I think that interest and liking and orientation towards and ease with which I'm able also to flow within languages has always also given me that sort of soft landing and ease with.
So actually, for my as a layman, I look at language very, very plainly, and I've even never considered what shall can be used against me. But for you guys, it's sort of your bread and butter to figure it out. I noticed, you have a very rich profile in law. You've worked with clients in the capital markets. You've done, property law, real estate. You've done intellectual property. Maybe just give me a brief on sort of how your experiences have been across those different segments. I would imagine these are different profiles of customers, some local, some international, some retail, some institutions. Sort of how has been your sort of experience sort of navigating different nuances of different sectors?
Well, it's been very exciting. I think I got a unique opportunity. I think before I left my undergraduate, which I undertook at the University of Nairobi, just before I finished school, in fact, the funny story is that with my roommate, we made CVs, quite a number of CVs, and we were very keen on not going and just staying at home after we had finalized our bachelor's course. So we say that we decided that we needed to do what we needed to do to ensure that we secured a place of work, just to ensure that once you're done with the bachelor's program, usually you have to now progress to doing the postgraduate diploma, the advocates training program, they call it. So now for you to qualify and be admitted on the role of advocates. So we were keen on securing a place in a good place of work. So in fact what we did, we printed blank CVs, around maybe 10 or more, each of us. Then we left the place for the addressee blank. At least for some because we had an idea of some of the organizations that were around town and in Upper Hill. We wrote the specific addressees. Then we took an afternoon and walked around and dropped CVs in the various organizations. We went to Ep2, we went to IRA, which is just across. We went to Capital Markets Authority at Embankment Plaza. The places that we felt we would have liked to work in. And, as fate would have it, I was called for an interview with the Capital Markets Authority, and I performed well at the interview, and immediately I left work on Friday. I had already secured a place. I started working on Monday as a legal assistant in the licensing and approvals department. So
I think this is the point I say I wish I were a lawyer. Because I'm sure for most of us, our experience is quite, not that sort of, we had sort of twists and turns before we get to where we are now.
Yeah, it happens a lot, and maybe it was by luck, by good fortune that we were able to get those opportunities, but at least having tried and gone out of our way to make the applications, I think also helped. So I had always had, some liking for commercial law and the related laws around business organizations and all that. So I was quite excited when I got that opportunity, and there we were helping with, I was sort of assisting the licensing and approvals team with review of applications made by what you call market intermediaries. Market intermediaries are companies that have been licensed by the Capital Markets Authority. So just briefly, the Capital Markets Authority is the government agency in Kenya that is mandated to regulate the capital market space. So where you have the biggest of its licensees, of course, is the Nairobi Securities Exchange. And then we have investment banks, we have fund managers, we have investment advisors, we have stockbrokers, and there has been an increase in the categories of license. Now we even have foreign exchange brokers. So I was helping with, when we have corporate bonds being issued, I was assisting with reviewing, at least to see the legal side is properly done. When you had rights issues being done. The capital markets at the time was a bit more vibrant than it is right now. There's hope that with the stabilizing economy to pick up. So that's sort of where I got my first engagement with capital markets. I worked there for 2 years. Then I had to leave now to go and pursue my postgraduate diploma. And then after I finalized with the advocates training program, with the postgraduate diploma, part of that postgraduate diploma is being posted to a law firm to undertake what you call pupillage. Pupillage is where you serve under an advocate that has practiced for more than 5 years, just for you to sort of an apprenticeship, to understand the ropes.
And for those of us who don't get the law profession, why it's sort of like for the rest of us, we sort of you graduate campus and go work. Why is it necessary for this postgraduate? Is it focused on specifics around law that were not covered during undergrad, or how does it sort of what would be the flavor of difference in that?
So the most distinguishing feature of that part of the learning is that it's more practical. So you realize that at bachelor's level, at the LLB level, there's much more theory. I think the only opportunity you have to have a practical experience is something called clinicals, where you are attached to, say, a magistrate in most cases in your second year. Well, some institutions are trying to improve on the elements of what's practical within the curricula of LLB, but mostly it's theoretical. So the diploma, the postgraduate diploma, is now mostly focused on what you as an advocate will be experiencing in your daily operations, when you're serving clients, when you're going to court. So it's heavily practical. It's heavily practical, and it sort of helps now to standardize, because there are quite a number of institutions that are offering law as an LLB as a course. So it helps now to standardize and ensure all persons that are now admitted on the role of advocates have a certain grasp of its practical aspects.
What would you say is the advantage? I'm assuming there are some lawyers who would graduate conclude their undergrad and go straight to postgrad, and for you, you sort of did this and then went to the CMA, worked there, a bit in getting sort of now hands-on, and then go back to school. Maybe how did that sort of shape the way you would even undertake your career post the postgrad?
Well, most people are keen to quickly finalize with both the parts of the LLB and the learning and get on with practicing. But I think for me, because of that unique opportunity to sort of experience that specific space, I felt it would add quite some significant value if so I just delayed by a year, and it shaped now how I was able then later on to understand and practice within the space of commercial law.
And now looking at it from an outsider, you were part in capital markets early on. How has that sort of institution and generally the capital markets ecosystem changed or evolved over time? I know you've mentioned that the capital markets is not as vibrant as I remember back in my I think high school and even university. We used to hear a lot of rights issues of or listing, cross listing, and for some of us it's been a decade, and probably we've had to find value in either investing with private companies or startups. Maybe just a flavor on how the capital markets has changed, and where do you see generally the capital markets going in the next couple of years based on your experience?
I think there's been a lot of varied factors that have impacted on the performance of the capital markets. So part of it, of course, is generally how the economic outlook, both locally and internationally. We had a couple of years ago, there has also been some negative investor sentiment. We had a time when we had the Chase Bank corporate bond collapse. We had the bank having issues and collapsing. We had Imperial Bank, and both of them collapsed shortly after they had taken up corporate. They had taken up. They had issued corporate bonds. And that sort of had some negative impact on the investor sentiment. We have also had accessibility, capital raisers or institutions that seek to raise capital having more alternatives, so to speak. And I think in the last few years there has been a lot of preference to get, say, money from venture capital, so the private equity space. So there has been quite some growth in that segment of the financial markets, and that has tended to lower now. It has tended to lower the appetite. The appetite of that, So we've also, of course, had how our regulations are taken up and understood by the market. We only have a few companies that have listed. Sometimes listing has been looked at by certain by the market generally as being a place for companies that are not doing well, while in other jurisdictions it's actually the place for companies. It's the apex of how well a company can perform. So there's some of those things need to be worked around, so that then we have more confidence, and we have now more persons coming in to invest in the capital market space. Of course, we've also had a lot of domestic borrowing by the government, which tends to mop up all available liquidity, and you see now most of the people who would have invested in the space and sort of created some momentum now preferring to take up treasury bills and bonds and so forth. So nonetheless, there's a lot of hope within that space. There has been, as I said, a variation of licensees. While before we had the traditional stockbroker alone, we now have what you call online foreign exchange brokers. Almost 10 licensed online foreign exchange brokers. There has been.
So would you say the cost of entry, or the cost to enter the space as a market participant has been lowered? If I could provide services online, I don't need to have footprint in country, but I have the demonstrated expertise. Do you see that sort of ecosystem, has it improved in that regard?
Well, not necessarily. I think there is an attempt mostly to work on the side of, deepening just understanding and deepening the number of persons who are participating or are players within the capital market space. But I still feel that there is a lot more that needs to be done on the side of incentivizing, from having the regulations be a little less stringent and more understandable. Sort of appreciating the changes that come with a changing world, and not having a lot of emphasis on traditionally emphasized requirements, so there's also significant capital requirements. There's significant investor protection, which sometimes, while on the one hand is very crucial in protecting investors, sometimes tends to limit the participants.
Increases the compliance.
Exactly, increases the compliance cost. So there's a lot that I think within that space that needs to be done, both at the NSE level, if you are set to have more listings in the coming years, and also on the side of the regulator in terms of minimizing the the minimum requirements for market for entrance, so to speak. But there's a lot of hope. Kenya is a vibrant market. There's a lot of products that are coming up. There are a lot of beautiful companies and promising companies, to use a more appropriate word, that are coming up that can be, can go the full journey of, getting to up to the listing space, and there being more participants. Of course, in my view also, I feel that from a traditional perspective, and also having practiced real estate and property law and conveyancing, that we have always also as a tradition, or as a people, as a culture, had a lot of emphasis on tangible wealth. So there has been, you find that people have 20 or consider success to be that in your safe or wherever in the bank you have 10, 15 title deeds, put somewhere, and there's a lot of emphasis on brick and mortar and the mchanga itself. So I think, while over the years, real estate has tended to be among the leading earners of or growers and places where you can grow and preserve wealth, there's also need for there to be other opportunities outside of that, because as our population increases, there may be a need to rethink also we cannot. I think I was having a conversation with people the other day, and sometimes every time, for example, myself, I hear about 50 by 100. It becomes nightmarish because everyone now thinks, oh, let me take, especially when you're in speculation space, take 5 acres, hold it for 5 years, subdivide it into 50 by 100. Really, it can't be that our entire land use and management policy is more defined by 50 by 100. So there's need for a reorientation, a rethink of our policy in a way that is more sustainable. We've had the governor of Nairobi speaking about, that Nairobi is limited. I think the other critical conversation that needs to be had outside of the fact that there's need for housing in Nairobi is also that we have very little arable land as a country. So how then do we optimize the use of arable land? And for me, it's by having also policies that allow for participation within the capital markets. We have very, very amazing and well-performing agricultural related companies like Kakuzi. And some of those should be encouraged, and there should be supporting frameworks to sort of reshape how people think around. Because if a normal person invests in shares in Kakuzi and ends up earning both in capital and in
dividends
in dividend, in profit, and instead of having 20 titles in some funny place, then that may be more attractive. If we have products like what you call real estate investment trusts.
Maybe you want to unpack that in terms of what are they, how does someone engage as a either retail or institutional investor?
Oh, that's real estate investment trust. So real estate investment trusts is a product that was sort of initiated or innovated in the United States, where you are able to own a portion of real estate. It can be a complex or a group of complexes. So the same way, say you have someone owning shares in Safaricom, is the same way, say you'd have now someone owning a portion of, say, the GTC, the new building that is in Upper Hill. So say there's a structural, there are provisions on there's a rate manager, there are trustees, there's the units themselves, there's how you get in by buying the units. The units are traded on the exchange. So it tends to it's also one of the major disadvantages of land as an asset, of course, as you know, is that it is not liquid. So one of the things we face as practitioners of property law is someone comes with an emergency and they're like, gosh, I have or I've worked very hard, especially the older generation who sometimes tend to have more health issues and so forth. So I have 20 titles and I need to have a medical procedure that costs this much done, but I can't seem to find a buyer for my land. So some of the ways then that in the future and even now currently people can have solutions to that problem of illiquidities by having products like those ones become more vibrant and more uptaken. I think there's a developer called Acon, and they're trying to do the same around the Kwetu project.
The guys who did like a green bond.
Yes. So the world is moving in a way that there are so many new innovative ways to look at issues that we have looked at from a traditional lens and to optimize how we interact with them. So I think from that perspective, then there's a lot of hope within that capital market space, but there'll be need for a lot of work, both from the regulator and from other stakeholders.
Interesting that you've mentioned a bit of the real estate segment. I think I was reading somewhere it says 90% of the wealth that has been created in Africa, I don't know if it's in Africa or with Africans, is through land. So for majority of people, the craze to acquire land seems not to stop. Even with all these new avenues, we still, as a people or as a culture, we still want to hold on to tangible assets, whether rightly or wrongly. Maybe you want to give an example. For example, now we have opportunities to, in the regulations around sectional titles, and I'm able to own, a piece of an apartment block rather than maybe have idle land. I can engage in that value creation through that means. Maybe you want to mention that, and what other opportunities are you seeing, particularly now in the private space outside the rates that you've already mentioned?
Well, yeah, as I said, I think there continues to be innovation within the real estate space as well. So I think 2 years ago, we, for example, enacted what you mentioned, the Sectional Properties Act, where now, unlike before, where I think people used to call apartments air, when you're buying, you would actually hear people curse and say, I would never buy an apartment. I'm actually buying air, when it's said in some languages, it sounds more in French, it sounds more so the people then were being discouraged, but there has to be solutions around the problem, say, of increased rural urban migration. More and more people are settling in urban areas than they were a few years before. I think I was reading some demographics, and at independence, I think we were around 10 million or less as a country. Now we are almost 60 million. In the next couple of years, we're going to be So how then do we solve some of the problems of housing that become very pertinent when you have such a huge population? So the Sectional Properties Act now cures the issue of owning units that are within vertical spaces. So while before there was only one title held by the development. Say if you have an apartment that has 10 floors, the practice was that one title, the mother title is retained, then each of the persons who owns a unit, their entry of a lease in favor of the unit is recorded within the mother title. Then there's a management company that is registered at the company's registry, where the mother title is transferred to. And then the people, the unit owners, are given shares in that management company. But now there was an attempt to in fact introduce the current law in the 90s, but it never kicked off for a variety of reasons. But now it's been a really it's well accepted. There had been some some quotas that were disgruntled here and there, but that's the nature of any new law. There has been some very good uptake of that product. We have quite a number of units, new and old, that are now transitioning into that space, into the sectional properties space. And the beauty here is that now every unit owner is given their own sectional title. The common areas that were previously held by that management company are now very, very well provided for within the new framework, because there's a computation that is done, and then the ratio of the common area if you have a unit, the ratio of the common areas that you own is reflected there, and it's reflected on the title. There's now a removal from involvement of having to comply with two regulations, the lands regulations within the land laws and the ones for companies, and now there has been a shift where you have a corporation that is formed that is registered at the lands office. And from the onset, once you have what you call a sectional plan, that's what is referred to when they are registering the corporation. There is what you call georeferencing. That is also a way to help digitize and have a more robust land management system.
My understanding is that process is still ongoing with like digital. Is it part of the digitization of the land, the legacy titles?
Yes, that is ongoing. In fact, the start was with Nairobi. Yeah. I think then it moved to I think 2 other counties that are almost done. But in Nairobi, it's already up and running. Yeah. There was what you call Adhisasa platform. The Adhisasa platform where or what you call Nairobi block titles have now been, that were gazetted. There was a gazettement, a series of gazettements that were now requiring the listed titles that were being moved from the old regime to the new regime to be that they're replaced, and there's conversion even for those including development and georeferencing. There's now, I think, a fully digitized master cadastral map for Nairobi, and those processes have to go in at the same time, because you first have to do the survey process, then you do the titling process. So there has been great. I have personally done a number of transactions on the system, and it's the third attempt by the Ministry of Lands, but this time I think they seem to be getting it right. There are a few teething problems, and as lawyers and various practitioners, we keep butting heads with the Ministry of Lands officials and with land registrars in a bid to ensure that the process is as watertight as possible. But there's a lot of positives with that process, because I think one of the reasons that we had that becoming a very crucial part of how we manage our the land within our borders is, traditionally we had different regulations or different legislations over the years, some beginning from as early as the 1920s when the colonial government came to the republic, and based on those different sets of legislations, then we had titling being done, because the first titling was just basically the coastal and the inland registry, and then we had later on titling that was more appreciative of the units, so that we had district registries. So as a practitioner or even as a property owner, it's possible for you to have, well, this is technical, but you can have a title they call a GLA title, which is the last conveyance in the transaction. You can have an RTA title. You can have an RLA title, the Registered Titles Act, Registered Land Act. So what
that's how even your title is coded, right?
Yes.
Is that sort of okay? Now that makes sense.
So that tended to become a problem, because then you are unable to, when you say want to implement certain new measures across board, then it becomes difficult, because they may not be applicable across all the titles as they should be. In addition to many other challenges, questions of the sanctity, integrity, protection of the titles themselves also becomes a little more difficult. But the Constitution of Kenya 2010 required that there is a unified titling framework and titling system, and as a result, in 2012 we enacted the Land Registration Act, the Land Act, among other set of laws to govern how land is administered in Kenya. And it's on that basis now that there's that effort to have all titles within the borders now under one singular unified system. That will make it very easy, because whether whether you're in Nairobi or you're in Kisumu, then and the titles are similar, so there's no risk that there may be issues arising based on the nature of title that you have. So I think once that process is done, there's a lot of there's a lot of effort to have it rolled out in the rest of the counties. But I think once that process is done, then it will help a lot in how we then manage and deal with land, whether it's sale, transmission, purchase, and even at government level, how land is administered, may it be public or trust or private. Because, for example, if you have a cadastre that is very advanced, at the click of a button, which is what now is possible, you're able to even have an aerial view of all titling within the county of Nairobi. You're able to even tell where, say, portions of land that have been reserved as forests, like the Karura forests. So it even helps in ensuring that there's safeguards when the people don't end up encroaching on public land.
Just to take you back on the issue of high-rise apartment, is quite a hot button nowadays.
Yes.
On one hand, I get it, the sectional titles sort of are providing value, the liquidity issues you had mentioned. Now I can invest in a similar amount. I would buy land, but still earn either rental income, optimize my tax obligations, and even use my title as collateral to unlock, say, financing. However, there's also the argument that it sort of favors, the investor side. But there are previous areas that were categorized as residential townhouse, but now it's sort of like a fight between profits versus convenience, especially for legacy owners of those spaces. Are there legal recourses, or how do we navigate, either as an investor, also as a a landowner or a property owner that is caught up in all this?
Well, I think that's a very good question. So there's an act of parliament called the Physical Planning Act. So the Physical Planning Act is meant to be the basis on which all the agencies that are involved with, especially zoning, set out the rules and regulations within which developments should be set up and put up. So part of the problem, of course, has been the parties or the agencies that are tasked with ensuring that there's adherence to not only the Physical Planning Act, but all other laws around, because there are also laws at county level around how structures are put up. There's the Environmental and Management Control Act, which also relates to riparian land, and the agency we call NEMA that empowers it to ensure that there's adherence to also its framework. So we have had, and I think that this has been a common problem in Kenya. The first one, of course, is that there has been lack of regard and proper implementation of laws which are working properly. The second one, of course, has been poor planning. So that while we already have structures that within which there can be proper management of the high-rise buildings and how certain portions of land are zoned, then there is both poor planning, there's also corruption. So we have people using whichever means to bypass those laws, and sort of sometimes there's always that question around our laws at times that we do not fail as a country because of lack of legislation, but
Enforcement.
Very poor enforcement and implementation. So I think for me that is where the crux of the problem lies. That the county and all stakeholders, the NEMA, the Ministry of Lands, need to have a very clear and laid out, a very clear laid out and consistent and coherent story around how to implement laws around, say, zoning. Because, for example, yes, we appreciate there's need for increase in housing, but it has to be done in a very structured manner. There's also the supporting infrastructure like roads, like sewerage. So, for example, does the zoning plan, for example, align with the plans of the Nairobi Water and Sewerage Company in terms of the strategic planning? So there's such disjointed. The efforts are there, but they're disjointed. There's lack of clarity, there's lack of coherence, there's lack of communication, and that sort of makes, enhances the problem. While the problem is understandable and the solutions are clear, but it becomes very difficult.
It's like different parts of the market had growth spurts at different stages.
Exactly.
We went overboard with high-rise property, upmarket, and we left sewerage and all that behind. And then now we are trying to make these places, these other parts, play catch up.
Interesting. Maybe just to shift, we've talked about your capital markets experience, real estate. But also an interesting space you've covered is the area of intellectual property. I know it's also an area full of jargon. So maybe just before we go deep, just define a few terms for us: patents, copyrights, all that.
So intellectual property is very interesting, and I think especially the Kenyan youth are very vibrant. There's a lot of robustness. I think every time you go to CBD, you find people doing what you call content creation. Doing skits and TikTok videos and so forth. So it's also become a very necessary tool for the youth who are within spaces where they're generating what would be considered intellectual property. So I think crucially, mostly the ones that are, of course, copyright is a common one. Copyright is where there's expression of original material that is original. So when it's expressed, say, in the form of literary works or in the form of audiovisual or a film, so that when it's converted from whichever other form and it's expressed, that expression then becomes protectable under copyright. So of course you've seen people having their YouTube videos brought down because of what is considered copyright infringement. So based on there's a body that is called Kikobo, the Kenya Copyright Board, where if you have, say, you've done music or you've written a book, then you're able to go and obtain a copyright certificate. But that notwithstanding, from the date of expression, the material that the material that is being expressed becomes the rights of the copyright. The copyright becomes now subsists from that date, notwithstanding registration or not. So it's not necessarily that you have to. The only difficulty becomes now in proving, say, if you have people who've done the same material in different geographical areas, and so how do you distinguish who did it first? Then of course there's trademarks. Trademarks have been quite popular. This is where then you use symbols. Say you have a logo, or you're using your wordmark, or it's a combination. Of course we know the most popular trademarks like Nike and Coca-Cola. So it's sort of a trade name that distinguishes your goods or services from those of competitors or other players within the market. So those ones are common. Like consistently, you have people registering copyrights, people registering trademarks. Trademarks are registered at the Kenya Industrial Property Institute. It's just along I think James Gishuru Road. So we also have one. Of course, I think one of the things I would also mention about trademarks is that there's a lot of the anti-counterfeit body. I think has a lot of mostly when you're dealing with anti-counterfeit products, they revolve around someone using people's to doing to the masses into buying a product for with a misrepresentation that it is they're called knockoffs in the street. So the anti-counterfeit, there's a body, an agency of government that has been struggling to also deal with that issue of that relates to infringement in that space around that intellectual property. Of course, you have patents. Patents are the highest form of, or among the highest forms of intellectual property, because they are those that are accorded to innovators. So, as an innovator, there's a certain criteria. It has to be new. It has to be industrially applicable. There's a certain criteria that has to be met, which is usually high. There's a high threshold. But then once you're granted a patent, then you possess that, and you can enjoy and exclude others from using your patent without your authority. There's what you call the petty patents, called a utility model. So you had products that do not necessarily meet the threshold of a patent, but they have they still meet a number of the qualifications. Like I think there's ceramic G-core that that uses clay instead of. So some of those then are protectable within the space of utility models. So majorly those are the main ones. There are a number of other intellectual property protection. There's trade secrets. The common one is everyone says how the formula of Coca-Cola is a trade secret. There are only two people any time who know it, and they cannot travel in the same aeroplane. So there's so much within the intellectual property space, but mostly the ones that people interact with on a more regular basis are copyrights, trademarks, to an extent utility models and patents. So there's of course also a number of emerging issues around intellectual property, especially with the advent of artificial intelligence, because some questions say around what generative AI like ChatGPT produces about assignment of rights, maybe copyright, for example, within that space. So how is it treated? So increasingly now it's also becoming a very interesting space.
We still don't have like an AI commission, or like who is trying to solve around such? We still go to Kipi, Kekobo, all these.
Yes, the existing agencies are trying to come up with internal policies and deal with that part of regulation of space. But I think the government recently, put out some directives and guidelines around the direction we are likely to take. But there's still some work that is needed.
Yeah, because even so, I think some startup in the US was playing around with this, having like a robo lawyer, like a bot lawyer. So instead of paying thousands of dollars, you just type and they give you legal advice.
No, it's becoming a very
so, but now the question is, who is liable? You sue the app
For professional
now, who do you go after?
those are very pertinent issues. In fact, there has even been, one of the things around, say, generative AI, mostly when you're engaging, you're moving the court, it's through submissions, both written and oral. So there has been use.
This is, when you're saying generative, this is AI that, a piece of content that is machine generated.
Yes.
Yeah, not, there's
yes.
no human interface.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So you see, some of the things that I think, some of the issues that have been coming up, of course, also relating to how the courts are moved and addressed, especially within the adversarial system, is we've had cases where we have people using, and the thing around generative AI is if you ask, if you request it to provide, say, a case relating to a certain matter, because we also, part of the ways we engage it is through precedents, previously decided matters. If it checks within its system and it lacks any case that is similar to your ask, then it generates it.
Oh, okay.
So that has been an issue where, and it's only, I think in that particular case, what saved the parties on the other side is that they were able to demonstrate that the case that had been referred to actually never existed, did not exist. So there are those questions. I think there was someone also saying that ChatGPT has been subjected to the bar, and I think it passed.
Yeah.
So effectively, it could be admitted to the role of that.
It's a lawyer, digital lawyer.
So I think that's a continuing conversation, and there's a lot that we are yet to see within that space. Yeah.
Interesting. Maybe now that you're seeing these emerging issues, what, maybe as a closing remark, what would you say should either young upcoming legal practitioners or just are these things we should invest our time in? Is this something that you're going to build bread and butter around? If someone holds the competence around it, maybe just mention where you're seeing these trends affecting the legal fraternity.
Yeah, I think certainly there's a lot of opportunities within the new spaces. I think we now have what you call the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. Data protection and privacy has now become a very crucial element of human interaction. There are quite a number of legal issues in that space, both within data protection and even within cybersecurity. And I think they are likely to move beyond the small scopes and even be at a larger landscape. Because I think a few months ago, sometimes last year, we had an issue where we had our systems, Safaricom and I think eCitizen, having some issues, and it was being said that it had been as a result of hacks by some South Sudanese or whatever. So there, for example, a question would arise: is hacking the systems, or is hacking systems of a sovereign nation, does that warrant to be an act of war? So those are now public international law issues. So I think over time the things will evolve in ways that, because I could foresee a case where two countries are presenting themselves before say the international court, just to litigate on whether hacking into the other country's system.
I think there was someone who was arguing that we already are in World War III because we are already seeing information wars between the West and the East, and parts of Asia, and then there's also technological war. So all these shadow wars, and all that also includes what you are saying, cybercrime and access to data. We saw US banning, the issue of banning of TikTok, all that. Yeah, you're right. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so I think I would encourage upcoming practitioners to be very welcoming of the various, the diversity of the legal space. Not only the legal space, I think with the very, very constantly and rapidly evolving world, there is a constant need for even the existing lawyers to keep bringing themselves up to speed. Because some things will very quickly be rendered obsolete.
And then last one is on, you've now transited from, working under someone's practice to your own.
Yes.
I always see this thing where there are 3 or 4 names of partners on the wall. But doctors, engineers tend to go it on their own. Maybe the benefits of, if I am a lawyer and I want to set up my practice, what should I consider? Do I go alone? Do I partner? What sort of competencies, or what things I should sort of foresee in terms of products, and also in terms of just how I package myself and plan as a business now? Maybe just shed a bit on the business of law.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think there's always 2 facets that are crucial in any person practicing within this space, especially if you're a practitioner and you're not an in-house counsel. That's the practice of the law, and the business of the law. So for example, where I have been working for the last 7 years, it's called the firm of Muman Kanjama Advocates. I was leading the commercial team there before I now moved out to set up my own shop with the other 2 partners. So I think in the benefit, for example, of having more than one partner is that you're able to leverage on the set of skills that each partner brings to the table. So for example, at KKN, while I handle real estate, capital markets, banking and finance, having worked with a number of banks within the last 6 years, Gerald Kitty, who is a managing partner, has more been on the disputes side, where he's been handling litigation, arbitration, mediation. So he's been offering that as a service for the last also close to 7-8 years. So, and the other partner, Ngugi, has been doing tax law, corporate law, mergers and acquisitions for the last also roughly 8 years. So you see, when we bring that together, then we are able to have a wider offering in terms of the sectors and the practice areas that we are all competent in, and are able to offer to the services we are able to offer to our clients. And in addition to that, there are always interplays, because mostly the issues that are being contracted for are the ones that end up going to court. So when you have more than one partner, you also
can do the entire life cycle.
Exactly. And especially if you are all involved in the operation and in the management of cases of files in the firm, then you also enrich the experience. So the real estate lawyer and the tax lawyer understand more about the disputes relating to their areas of practice, and they're able to give a better service to anticipate some of these contestations and disputes when they're doing their work. The disputes lawyer as well is also able to understand and constantly update themselves.
What would be the triggers for that dispute?
Exactly, what is likely to lead to what. So from a practice level, that becomes the benefit. From a business level, of course, you also now are able to assist because it's business. So
it's a scalable way.
You're able to scale a little faster, but also you're able to pull much more clients in the fold. And sometimes the fortune sometimes aligns for different persons differently. So of course there are months that one partner will do better than the other, and you're able now to balance that, so that then, and like when you are only a sole proprietor, and if you have a difficult month, you are not even able to serve your clients because you're just thinking about how you'll pay salaries. And of course, I think the third one I would emphasize on is, I think when you're more, you're also able to put in structures. You're able to institutionalize. You're able to breathe life into the enterprise a little more than when it's a sole proprietorship, where the individual is the farm. So that is actually a very big benefit, because then there's a longer term view of the business. You're able to create something that can outlive you and go beyond generations.
Have a life of its own.
Yes, have a life of its own. So we are very hopeful. We are very hopeful and excited, and we welcome all clients to visit us, and we are going to serve them and give them top-notch legal services.
Yeah, that was it's good to end on a sales pitch. Thank you so much, Oscar. I've learned a lot from this conversation around even the career of law. I'm sure this conversation will be watched by parents, young people trying to make decisions about their career and their footing in this world. I've also learned around different segments and opportunities that lie on the horizon. So this conversation has been quite fulfilling for me personally, and also I hope for the audience. So thank you for your time, and I'm sure we would have time to talk more in the near future.
Thank you so much for having me, and you're most welcome to visit anytime and to work with us.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.